Today we're looking at this, the full frame SIRUI Saturn 35mm t2.9 or 1.6 times anamorphic lens. This lens has been making quite a lot of noise on YouTube recently, not only for its price, but for its relatively tiny size and, you know, its pretty respectable image quality. I've been testing this lens on my LUMIX S5 2X, and while it's certainly not perfect, I have been surprised by just how much fun I've been having with this lens. I've generally stayed away from a lot of the budget anamorphics from SIRUI. I just sort of thought they were a bit gimmicky and, you know, not really geared towards a lot of my professional work. And that's mostly down to quite over-exaggerated flares or quite uncontrolled flares. However, with this lens, I think they've hit a really nice sweet spot between price, size, and image quality. Although it does have one major flaw, I think, which we'll look at in a bit, but also don't worry because I'll share a great, affordable workaround that essentially supercharges this lens, so stay tuned for that. Just a quick note before we get into the video, if you're not subscribed to this channel and if you're new here, I would love it if I could earn a subscription from you. If you do enjoy this video, please hit that like button. I'm at the early stages of growing this channel and stuff like that just really helps with the algorithm and helps me grow my audience. Although it's very lightweight, this lens feels very sturdy. Obviously, it's fully manual, both with its aperture and its focus wheel. If I'm honest, I found the aperture and focus ring both to be a little bit too stiff. The focus throw itself isn't very long. But aside from that, you know, you can see that this thing is absolutely tiny. It weighs about 415 grams. And although it's sort of long and thin, you can see here how it compares to chunkier offerings from SIRUI with the Nightwalker lens and my Desio Film Vespid lens. It's available in a ton of mounts, which I'll show on screen here. And the one I've been using is obviously in L mount, so I've been using it natively with my LUMIX S5 2X. Unfortunately, it does not come in PL mount or EF mount, so you can't adapt it or use speed boosters with it. I thought a good way to test this lens would be to take it out during golden hour and see how the flaring behaved. So I went down to our local park with Steph and I shot on a very minimal setup with my LUMIX S5 2X. So just a camera, a top handle and a small monitor, and then also worked with a variable ND to control my exposure. And I also brought some little screw-on diopters, but we'll talk more about those in a bit. You can pick up this lens in two flare variants, so you can get blue or natural, and natural's the one I got. It's where the flare takes on the color of the light source. I decided to get this because I sort of saw a lot of footage from the blue flare variant and it just looked maybe a little bit too aggressive, a bit over-exaggerated. And I also liked being able to influence the color of the flare depending on the light source. I just thought it would be slightly more flexible for professional work. So we just got these like really beautiful amber flares when we were shooting with the setting sun, and I just really love that quality. And I think, you know, having a blue flare interrupt the frame when you're shooting footage like this might look a bit weird, or it might sort of interrupt the vibe, the warm vibe of the scene. It's not so much on the subtle side, I would say. It was quite easy to get it to flare, as you can see in this footage here. But again, like, you know, your tolerance to flaring is going to be super subjective. I actually wasn't really expecting much from this lens, maybe because of its size and its price. I mean, it's not cheap, but it's cheap for an anamorphic lens. I was just really impressed with the quality of the footage when I got it back. It was really clean, it was really sharp, it was really sort of rendered colors nicely. It's a full frame lens, so you get full frame sensor coverage, which, considering its size and weight and price, again, is amazing. It's a 1.6 times anamorphic lens, so that means in post you're de-squeezing the image, stretching the horizontal of the image by 1.6 times. Kind of just about enough, getting a nice anamorphic image, the stretched bokeh and stuff like that. A note on shooting anamorphic on LUMIX cameras is I've noticed that they do tend to suffer from quite aggressive rolling shutter when shooting in full sensor mode, especially in open gate. And then when you combine this with the anamorphic IBIS mode, you know, it's amazing that these cameras have anamorphic IBIS, but especially on wider focal lengths of 35mm or less. In combination with that rolling shutter, it just tends to amplify this sort of weird jello distortion effect that kind of ruined a lot of my footage when I took it out. Now the problem with that is that also if you turn the IBIS off, the sort of micro jitters you get from using this lighter setup also don't look any better. So you're kind of a bit stuck, and you've got to be really careful with motion when shooting on a setup like this. However, when I started shooting in the crop sensor mode, a lot of this kind of disappeared, and I found that the footage was much nicer. It was much more organic and much smoother, and all of that sort of rolling shutter artifacting kind of disappeared. Yes, you have to contend with a bit of a crop, but you are just going to get slightly more fluid, natural looking footage from that. The other thing about this lens being a slightly more unusual squeeze factor is the 1.6 times squeeze. If you're monitoring in camera, then you are going to be getting an approximation of the image, which is why I relied on using the external monitor and using one that could dial in a custom squeeze factors. This lens isn't perfect, and there are a few things I want to talk about that you might want to consider if you are going to pick this lens up. My main criticisms with this lens relate to its pincushion distortion. You can see this at the extreme of the frame, the opposite of sort of barrel distortion, and instead of getting this fisheye effect, you get a more pinching in at the sides, so straight lines kind of bow inwards. I'm not a fan of that personally, maybe you are. It is possible to correct it to some degree in post, although that will introduce other sort of distortions and artifacts, and it will obviously take a bit of extra time. With the footage I shot in a more natural environment where there's not many straight lines, you don't really notice it and you'll get away with it. But if you're doing more sort of stuff centered around architecture or shooting in buildings or outside in cities where you've got, you know, a lot of straight lines, you're going to notice that on wide shots. Now, the other major flaw of this lens, and the thing that I probably found the most frustrating, is its minimum focus distance. It sits at around 0.9 meters, and that means you're kind of limited in the framing of this lens, and it really constrains what you can do creatively with it, which is a shame because this lens has a lot going for it, in my opinion. So you can't really get very close up to your subjects. And when I first tried this lens out, I actually found that to be quite frustrating and limiting. However, here is my super hack to get over this. That is using diopters, cheap screw-on diopters. So you don't need to spend an arm and a leg on them. I think they're about 16 quid or something on Amazon, and I just got the filter thread size for this lens. And they're sort of like magnifying glasses or reading glasses for your lens, and they allow you to get much closer up to your subject. I thought they'd trash the quality of the lens, but they didn't. You can see that they allowed me to get some like really beautiful close-up shots. It's almost like I sort of had a whole set of different anamorphic lenses, but all just by screwing on different strengths of these little diopters. If you are going to pick up this lens, then I think they're kind of an essential purchase as well. I was just really blown away by what I could achieve with this really tiny little thing on my tiny LUMIX S5. The footage I got back was beautiful and is a testament to the quality of this lens. If you are interested in checking it out, links to buy it are in the description below. I'd love to know what you think about it. What anamorphics are you interested in? Would you like me to test out some other anamorphic lenses? Let me know in the comments down below. If you like this video, obviously, please just give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. And until next time, see ya.